In our final segment, Chef Peterson demonstrates the recipe for chocolate ganache, which will yield 2 pounds. Ingredients include 1 pound bittersweet chocolate, 1 pint heavy cream, and 1 fluid ounce almond or coffee liqueur.
Today we're going to make a silky ganache. There's 2 kinds of ganache. There's a simple ganache and a silky ganache. The silky ganache is used for enrobing, whereas the simple ganache is basically used for fillings. We're going to start out with some 52% chocolate pellets right here. We have some soft butter. We have granulated sugar. We have corn syrup, and we have cream. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add the cream to our pot. The heavy cream also adds fat to the mixture, so it makes it nice and rich. We're going to go ahead and add our corn syrup. Corn syrup is going to ensure that we have a nice, shiny product. That's what the corn syrup is for, as well as flavor. The granulated sugar, go in there as well. And this we're going to go ahead and just put on the stove, stir it up a little bit, put it on the stove and let it come to a simmer. While this is getting warm, we're going to go ahead and combine our soft butter, and I emphasize soft butter. If the butter is too cold and too big pieces, it's going to be hard for the warm cream to melt everything together, and then you'll have to put it on a double boiler. So it's very important that you have butter that's room temperature and it's cubed up so that it's easier to work with. And that's all there really is to it. All you really have to do now is just wait for the cream to come to a simmer, and you're ready to go. All right. Now, as we can see, the cream is starting to come to a simmer, and just in a couple of seconds, we're ready to pour all the chocolate. I now have my cream ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and take it off the stove and very gently pour it over the chocolate and the butter. As you can see, it's very hot. You do not need to boil it, but it does need to be very close to a boil, at least about 180 degrees. Now we're going to let this sit for a couple of minutes before we stir it up. Doing that ensures that the chocolate and the butter has melted completely before we mix it together. Now that it has sit for a couple of minutes, I'm ready to stir it up. I'm going to go ahead and start out with a spatula first and just kind of fold it in a little bit. As I can see, I just want to double check and see that the chocolate has melted. It looks like the chocolate has melted. Then I'm going to go ahead and use my wire whip to do the rest of the mixing. It's very important you don't stir it too much. If you stir it too much with the wire whip, what's going to happen is you add air to your ganache. If you add too much air to your ganache, it's not going to be nice and smooth when you use it as an icing. See how nice and shiny it's getting? Stir it one more time, make sure there's no lumps in there. Got to be careful that all the chocolate and the butter has melted completely. It looks pretty good. As you can see, here we have our silky ganache, nice and shiny, all smooth, and no lumps of butter or chocolate in there. And now we got to let it sit and let it cool down a little bit in order for us to enrobe a cake with it. When you enrobe a cake with ganache, you want to make sure that it's down to below between 90 and 86 degrees. The reason for that is that the melting point of butter is 86 degrees. So if you use a ganache that's hotter than that or warmer than that, it will actually melt the icing that you enrobe the cake with, and you won't have a nice finish. So at this point, we're just going to let the silk ganache sit and cool down a little bit, and I'm ready to enrobe a cake. The ganache is still a little bit too warm, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in an ice bath just for a couple more seconds to make sure that we achieve the right temperature, which is around 86 degrees. As you put an ice bath, it's very important that you keep stirring, because the ice will really cool down the ganache very quickly. You don't want any lumps in there when you're stirring. So remember, don't whip your ganache around, just stir it very gently. If you whip it around, you're going to create lumps. Let's double check the temperature real quick. Going to stir it up just a little bit, make sure that everything is incorporated properly. You don't want uneven temperature when you do an iced cake or anything like that. You want to make sure that your ganache is very, very smooth, and at the same time the temperature is even all the way around. Otherwise there will be a discoloration on the cake after you have iced it. I'm going to go ahead and check my temperature now and see where I'm at. It looks like we're just about there. This is about 85 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and ice my cake. Again, I want to stir up my ganache to make sure that everything is the even temperature all the way through the ganache. Again, don't over stir it. Every time you stir it too much, you're going to add bubbles to it. I have here an offset spatula that works very well to ice a cake like this. And I like to use a ladle. Instead of pouring it out of the bowl, it's just more even if you use a ladle. So I'm going to take my ladle and put a ladle full of ganache in the middle of the cake. And maybe a half ladle more. It's also important that the cake that you're ganaching is not too cold. You don't want the ganache to set up too quickly. If it sets up too quickly, you're not going to be able to cover the whole cake. So as you can see, it's very smooth, and I believe it's covering the whole entire cake. So nice and shiny. And you just kind of tap your screen a little bit like this to get a little bit of the smoother texture. Now if you go ahead and touch it with a spatula here, you got to be very careful, because you'll create a little bit of a crease in the ganache. But all in all, it looks pretty smooth. And now all we got to do, we got to take it and put it in the refrigerator for about 15 minutes. That's all it really takes for this to set up. The butter fat in the ganache, as well as the butter we have in there, the cocoa butter, and the butter fat we have in here, is going to sit up firm enough that we can cut it, but soft enough to the touch, but it does not break or crack while we cut the cake. So it's very important that we do this properly, and that the ganache is very nice and smooth when we pour it on the cake. Again, the temperature of the cake that you're icing is important. It cannot be too cold. I would say around no more than 90 degrees in the surface temperature, as well as the ganache again should be about 86 to 90, no more than 90 degrees also, in order for it not to melt the buttercream that the cake has been enrobed with. So here we have it, and it should be ready to go in the refrigerator and then cut in about 15 minutes. Okay? Now we have our ganache that's set up real nice on our cake that we poured earlier. And I want to show you the technique of how to cut a cake that has been ganached. It's very important that you do it in the proper fashion. First of all, when you take it off the screen, you want to kind of ease it off the screen without having too much stuff hanging down the side. You want to make sure you kind of clean it off with the bottom of your offset spatula, so you don't have any excess ganache hanging off the side of the cake. Very important, otherwise you're going to have a messy finish. Okay? So we have that done right now. I'm going to go ahead and put this on the turntable, and I want to show you the proper technique of cutting this cake. In order to cut the cake properly, it's very important that you have a thin knife like this, a carving knife like this. It works very well. And you want to have some very hot water. And every time that you heat the knife up with the hot water, it's very important that you wipe off the excess water. Otherwise, you're going to have a very uneven, or you're going to have a very bad cut. At this point here, I'm going to cut evenly like this. And then I'm going to just very gently pull out the knife. If you pull out the knife this way here, you're going to ruin the nice even cut that you have created. Again, you clean up your knife between each cut. You clean up your knife and wipe it off. Like that. Very gently pull out the knife. Keep going like this till you have 12 even cuts. If a piece moves out like that, it's going to be pushed back in when you put something on the side of the cake. I'll demonstrate in just a second. As you see, it's very important that you're precise with the sizes of the cake that you're cutting. But the most important thing is that you wipe your towel off, or you wipe your knife off with a towel every time you clean your knife off in the hot water. If you do not do that, you're going to have a not so nice looking cake. See, now we have 12 even pieces here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take it off with the spatula, so you have a nice cake like this to look at. Okay? You're going to go ahead and and I'm going to put jimmies on the side, have the jimmies right here, and I'm just going to very gently put jimmies on the side of the cake. It's going to give it a real nice finish. Try to make sure you have an even amount on all layers. Okay? You have this, and now you want to put it on your platter that you have selected. Try to center it the best you can. Wipe down your turntable before you put the platter up on here, or you're going to have chocolate on the bottom of the platter. Here we go. Always try to work clean. And now you just want to finish up your cake with a few raspberries. Oops. That one didn't look too nice. There you go. Get yourself a clean towel. There's a little excess jimmies. Get them off so they look nice. And you can go ahead and take a little bit of jimmies and just put it in the center of the cake. And there you have it. A very nice, well-made chocolate ganache cake.